Hey, it's Courtney Barriger, your host of Environmental Style Now, the A to Z podcast on all that is sustainable fashion. Hey, happy 2021! May this year be everything that 2020 was not, in all the best ways. So, on this episode of ES Now, our special guest is Wilson Rumbeiha, professor of veterinarian toxicology at UC Davis, here to tell us his thoughts about the link between animals and fast fashion pollution. Hey, it's Courtney Barriger, and this is ES Now. Today, I'm with Wilson Rumbeiha of UC Davis. Born and raised in Western Uganda, he obtained his PhD in biomedical sciences with a focus on toxicology at Ontario Veterinarian College, and then moved to the U.S. where he finished his residency and postdoctorates across the country. He's a fellow in the Academy of Toxicological Sciences, and he's here to tell us his insight into how fast fashion pollution affects animals. Let's jump right in.
Well, I must confess that the way you approach this topic is very unusual for us in academia, veterinary toxicology. We typically don't think about how the fashion industry, for example, impacts human health. We typically don't think that way. Now, we might think about processes or products which are used for cleaning, washing, things like that might impact animals. But the way you're approaching it is very, very novel and requires some rethinking to realign with your theme.
Well, it is very specific. It's true. But, they say that fashion, the industry overall, is the second biggest polluter in the world. And I just imagine that has to affect animals.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Now, like I said, your topic got me really thinking, because when you think about fashion or clothing industry, you're thinking about a whole lot of processes that are involved before one actually buys that cloth, for use, and also what happens to that garment after it has been used. And fashion not only involves, clothing that you wear, but also things like leather, jackets, belts, shoes, and so forth. And all of these products have to be made, have to be manufactured for consumption. And after they are used, they are disposed of in one way or the other. They grow old or somehow they are disposed of. And all that has an impact on animal health. And generally, I came to think about it this way. We veterinarians, we treat all animals. Our patients are broad and include pets, food-producing animals, including wildlife, marine life, and so forth. So the animals that could be impacted by this potentially are many. Particularly, we could say maybe the entire ecosystem could potentially be affected by the fashion industry. And yes, so different processes along the way of making clothing or belts or shoes is going to lead to an impact on animal and human health along the way.
So what do you have to say about the beginning process of making apparel? The very first step of making apparel is sourcing material. So maybe we can go through kind of each process and maybe talk about some of the cause and effect there.
You asked me to start with sourcing material, which in this case might include cotton, maybe silk, and hides or skins and all that type of thing, those types of resources. I can go back, if we start with cotton clothing, for example. Cotton has to be grown And the input of it might involve use of fertilizers as well as pesticides, okay? And in order to produce a good crop. And some of these pesticides can be toxic some of them are specifically made to kill pests, such as bugs, which might be growing on the cotton plants. So you could find that those insecticides, although they are beneficial when they are applied to kill the insects, the pests, they could have side effects, killing unintended targets, off species. And so that directly could cause, an effect on the ecosystem. Well, let's fast forward. You've grown the crop, and you're harvesting the crop. It requires storage and transportation and to a plant, and then you have to turn that into a fabric. So there are a number of things that processes that are going to be involved in that, making that fabric. A number of chemicals are going to be used to transform it from the raw material to a fabric. And some of those may actually end up in the environment through water discharges. Other things that are added to fabric might include dyes, things like azo dyes, for example, and just to beautify the product or give it color and things like that. And so some of the dyes can be discharged in the environment. Some of it, when it is applied on the clothing during the manufacturing process, not all of it sticks. So some of it washes out and has to be discharged in wastewater somehow. So these dyes, especially DB38 or RB15 dyes, which are commonly used, have been shown to be probable carcinogens to people, but because of close similarity in how the body functions, they are also suspected to be mutagens, or they're going to be altering the genetic makeup of lower organisms in waterways, where they are discharged. So that is a direct pollution effect. The other example that I can bring up here is, for example, making of leather. People like leather garments, leather belts, or leather shoes, and the hides or skins have to be turned into these beautiful products that we enjoy in our fashion. But to turn it into those products, those raw materials go through a tremendous amount of preparation. So a number of chemicals added to the leather by the leather industry in order to turn it into a beautiful, durable product that won't rot. And some of those compounds that are used in tanneries include heavy metals like chromate. And these are compounds which are known to be cancer-causing, not only in people, but also to animals. But also, the whole process leads to discharge of a number of chemicals into waterways. These are commonly known as total dissolved solids or total suspended solids. There might be alteration of pH of water, and sometimes some of these discharges might even have color to them. And, nature sometimes abhors color because in the ecosystem, you find that living organisms have to depend on sun rays reaching them at the bottom of the river or the bottom of the ocean or wherever they are. But when you have color to it, it prevents light from passing through. And so these organisms depend on light reaching them, sunlight reaching them, and they cannot do their photosynthesis thing, and so that impairs their lives. So you also find that as you are preparing this leather, raw hides and skins, turning them into leather, you are going to be adding or removing nitrogen and phosphorus from these, which are going to be discharged. And these are nutrients which small organisms love to use. It's like fertilizer to them in waterways, and so causing processes that are known as eutrophication or changes in the ecosystem, whereby you have a overgrowth of certain plant species or microorganisms like blue-green algae. So that could impact water safety and also the species living in water, including fish. So it's a snapshot, just using two examples, how what you're wearing could be connected back to nature.
Wow, that is quite the impact. I'm curious to know about the process of when you're caring for your clothes. Once you bring it home, does it have an effect on your pets or possibly the ecosystem around the city or even a septic tank?
Yeah, excellent question, Courtney. Obviously, when we use these clothes around homes, we have to wash them, to launder them. Sometimes we do dry cleaning. This is just one aspect that I'm going to just pick on to discuss how that could impact animals. Actually, the National Animal Poison Control Center lists exposure to household chemicals as one of the most common causes of poisoning, especially in our pets, dogs in particular. And some of these household items include detergents that we use in washing machines to wash our clothes. There are different kinds of detergents, and some are actually like soap, some aspects of soap, very much not all that toxic. But what we're talking about here is accidental exposure of animals to these products, to these laundry detergent products, ranging from soap, anionic or non-ionic or cationic detergents. So there are several kinds. Generally, the soaps don't tend to be very toxic. If an animal ingests a soap, these are surfactants, and they may just cause a gastric upset. So might have a swollen tummy for a while, might have running stomach, might have some diarrhea, that type of thing, and that's the extent of it. But others can have extreme pHs. You've heard of what they call electric detergents, for example. These can be highly toxic, and mainly because they are caustic. They can be very irritating to the gastrointestinal tract from oral cavity down to the stomach and intestines. It can basically shear off the protective mucosa of the cells lining this gastrointestinal system, and can also cause swelling of the tongue or of the pharynx, which could also affect breathing. And if they are powders and an animal sniffs on it, they can get into lungs, and that could also have some detrimental effects on breathing, how the animal breathes. So you find that cationic detergents, electric dishwashing detergents, products like these, bleaches with high pHs, these can be a danger to animals living in household, especially pets. So the other aspect related to care of clothing that I want to bring up that has been a concern over many, many years is one of dry cleaning. Dry cleaning is done everywhere around the world. And by the way, my discussion is not just limited to the U.S. We're talking about the global impacts of this apparel industry worldwide. And you'll find that the dry cleaning industry uses a number of chemicals, and it has evolved. It just started off with using just hydrocarbons, for example, to using carbon tetrachloride, which was very, very toxic. Those have been phased out. But, recently they're still using things like perchloroethylene, which is one of the most commonly used chemicals in dry cleaning. Some people call it perchloroethylene or tetrachloroethylene, and another related cousin to it is trichloroethylene. So these are volatile compounds, and they can affect the brain, central nervous system, because inhalation of the fumes, it kind of is just mimics, drinking a little too much of alcohol. So depression, central nervous system depression, ataxia could be some of the effects, all the way to its effects or their effects on the kidneys and liver. The liver is particularly susceptible because it tends to want to break down these compounds, and in the process, it could be affected. But the rest, because it is also volatile, these compounds are volatile, they also affect the respiratory system. And in the respiratory system, they may actually lead to suppression of the immune system, because all along the respiratory tract, we have cells that are lining the respiratory tract, protecting it, or cilia, which protect us and animals from inhaling organisms. So if the cilia are affected, that could impact the breathing. So that is how, just talking about the terrestrial system, inhalation of those in animals, say if you have an animal, a pet, or, in an environment where these compounds are used, or close to places where these dry cleaning chemicals are used, they could permeate through air and reach the neighborhood, or through water and reach the neighborhood and cause some health effects in animals. Now, those are not big issues here, huge issues in the U.S., because you have guidelines regarding how much can be allowed in from the occupational point of view, how much fumes people can be exposed to, or how much discharges in water or what. But when you go beyond the U.S., it's heyday, it's open field. And you find that there's more potential for pollution in those areas. And so you end up with not only domestic animals being affected, but it discharges into the water system as well. And microorganisms can be affected by these chemicals as well. So there are many compounds, and I just mentioned that one, perchloroethylene, which damages the central nervous system, might irritate eyes, respiratory tract of animals, to all the way, I know these days they're using some better technologies like liquid carbon dioxide, which may not have as many effects. So to go back to your question, you asked me, how does the care of apparels or these affect animal health? And so accidental ingestion of detergents can have direct effect, as well as discharges into the environment from a dry cleaning industry can affect the ecosystem much as it is affecting animals and the people as well.
I had no idea that dry cleaning was so harmful. Wow.
I need to say that dry cleaning has actually changed over the years. When the industry started, more dangerous chemicals were used, and there is a constant evaluation of the industry to find better, safer, environmentally clean, sustainable products. And there are some that are not as dangerous as the other ones. And those may be more commonly used here in the U.S. For example, green earth detergent, which is used for dry cleaning. That is likely not to be as toxic as the perchloroethylene that I've talked about. So there are other products that people have developed, like EcoSolve and others. So I won't say that the whole dry cleaning industry is dangerous, but I can say that around the world, where access to the newer technology, the latest products which are eco-friendly, used to have big issues going on.
Well, that's all that we can hope for, is that innovation continues. That's really good news, actually, because I was just thinking, okay, well, that's the last time I bring anything to dry cleaning. But I guess what it means is that we should do a lot more research on who we're taking our dry cleaning to.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of good questions to ask. Hey, because sometimes I do it for the time when I take my clothes for dry cleaning. I don't ask, what they use, in their processes. Typically, I care about the price. How much is this going to cost me? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And but I typically don't know whether they're using reagents which are environmental friendly or less harmful to the environment, less persistent in the environment, and therefore environmental friendly. So I would say, those would be good questions to ask. Now, I don't go a lot to the dry cleaners. I don't know whether some are actually advertising themselves, because these days you find that some industries that are using eco-friendly, sustainable practices, they have logos, things like that. I'm not close enough to that industry to know whether that's going on. But that would be something to look for, logos that indicate that those particular, your favorite dry cleaner is adopting sustainable practices.
And it could be something better for even 2021, since everyone's sort of at home now anyway. But that'll give you enough time to do all the research and ask questions, which is a nice pause. It's a great pause.
Sure.
If you could choose one thing to improve in the cycle of fashion that we just talked about, which one would it be and why?
Yeah. I think, from all the literature I've seen, I think what really deserves the most attention is the leather industry, the process of tanning. That is a process which, in my experience, is involving, is leading to a lot of environmental pollution. There are lots of chemicals that are going to tanning the leather and turning it into beautiful products with beautiful smell that we enjoy. And I'm talking about leather couches, leather jackets, leather belts, leather shoes, and things like that. That process of turning that hide or skin into leather at the factory level, I think, is one that needs attention, much as, for example, the dry cleaning industry has tremendously improved. The unfortunate bit of it is that much of that is actually taking place in developing countries, Southeast Asia, for example, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Mongolia. I was in Mongolia maybe about 10 years ago, and they have a lot of livestock, and tanning industry is big there, and pollution is on their radar. But I don't think that there is enough effort that has gone in that industry. They're still using really archaic ways to turn those hides and skins into usable products. It has not changed to a sustainable green system. So if there was some environmentally conscious person looking to invest, that is the area I would look. And this is one world, and there are places where there are no regulations or regulations are not enforced, and they're using old technology. That is really leading to pollution of our world. And that's one sector that I would say needs it. Other than that, obviously, the other thing that we all do is washing our laundry and detergents, and making sure that those detergents, because everybody does it, so by volume, it has impact. We continue to develop environmentally friendly, sustainable detergents. I think that is still an area that has still room to grow, simply because that there is bulk of materials that are used for that. And I know, like, you remember I mentioned that accidental ingestion of those products, especially electric dishwashing detergents or cationic detergents and anionic detergents with extreme pHs, and some of them lead to generation of phosphorus, which goes into waterways and might cause the same eutrophication that I talked about. That is still a concern. So I think there's still room to improve there to prevent pollution at household level in this country.
How can consumers do it better regarding what they buy to better protect wildlife?
Well, really, what it would take is self-education and knowing what products they're buying and how those end up in the environment, whether they're biodegradable, whether they are persistent and whatnot. So looking for logos that indicate that the products are sustainable, eco-friendly. Looking for logos like that on products would go a long way. Of course, there are just hundreds and hundreds of these products. And even if you knew some today, some products are coming online tomorrow or in 2 months. So it's kind of hard to keep up. So I would say relying on logos, just like for medicines, for example, if you see a USP sign, that tells you that medication or product is good, it is certified, has a logo from a credible source. So using logos, buying products that have logos for indicating eco-friendly systems or products would be a way to go to help our planet, save animal lives, reduce pollution.
I wanted to ask you a couple of personal questions. How long have you been practicing animal toxicology as a vet?
All right. How long have I been practicing animal toxicology as a vet? A long time. You can tell that I'm speaking with an accent. So I went to veterinary school back in Uganda and graduated from veterinary school. And soon after graduation, I had a professor who taught me toxicology in the veterinary school, who was a United Nations patriot. He was actually from Bangladesh, and his contract was expiring, so he left the university. And I was drafted by my professor to come and help teach toxicology. So, and we're talking about now, long ago, 1982, 83. So, practicing it for a little while, I realized that I needed to get training some more into the field. So I went to graduate school. I actually went to Ontario Veterinary College here in Canada, next door in Canada, and majored in toxicology. And from there, I came down to where I can really say that I started the real practice of veterinary toxicology in this country was at Kansas State University in Manhattan, Kansas, where I trained as a resident in veterinary toxicology. I practiced, and my supervisor, my professor at that time, and got board certified. That is really became self-reliant at that point. And I can say I've been on my own since about 1992, 1993. So several years, at least 20, 25 years counting, since I've been practicing. And the journey has taken me through a number of institutions from Kansas State. I spent many years, at least 16, 17 years at Michigan State University in the diagnostic lab there, Diagnostic Center for Population and Animal Health, we used to call it that time. And I headed the toxicology section. Really, my job there, besides teaching, was diagnosing animals that were suspected to be poisoned. And just like you go to a hospital, the hospitals might have toxicology labs where they look what's in the urine, what's in, saliva, things like that. So I did that for animals for many, many years. And that's where really I got exposure to a broad range of toxicants affecting animals, domestic, pets, as well as wildlife. That's the beauty of toxicology. We deal with it all. The toxicologists, we deal with environmental toxicology. We deal all the way to, my pet has ingested Tylenol or things like that, as well as food safety aspects too, residues, getting into the food chain, all those aspects. So, I was at Michigan State from '96 all the way to 2011 when I joined Iowa State University. Did a bit of it, same thing. So it's been quite a while.
Is there anyone in your field whose work you admire?
Oh, in my field, whose work I admire?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, obviously. Yeah, I'm here at the University of California, Davis, and I'm not the only toxicologist here, veterinary toxicologist. I have a colleague of mine, Dr. Robert Popengay. He works for the California Animal Health Food Safety Lab, which is a diagnostic lab that I worked in, similar to one I worked in at Michigan State University or Iowa State University. Yeah, he's a very good world-class toxicologist, and I admire what he does. In our field, diagnostic toxicology, every day is different because you're going to get asked a question about suspected poisoning in a duck, From there, you might get a call all the way from Thailand, some issue to do with an elephant or something like that. So it's really interesting. Every day brings different opportunities and challenges, such that it's not boring. So I do admire him. But from him, I really admired my professor, who really held my hand. He's now resting in peace, Professor Fred Omi. He was a real trailblazer for our profession, did a tremendous amount of work, and it was a great pleasure training under him, seeing how he dealt with the patients and clients who were affected by poisoning.
And what are you up to now?
Good question. What am I up to now? So after spending 8 years at Iowa State University, the reason I actually moved to Iowa State was after practicing clinical diagnostic toxicology for those 15, 16 years, I needed a challenge. So getting more into research, okay? And so the opening at Iowa State allowed me to do some research as well as continue to do some of the clinical diagnostic work, developing new assays to improve diagnosis of animal poisoning. So I did that for 8 years. My profession has grown from clinical more into research. So moving here at the University of California, Davis, I'm in the Department of Molecular Biosciences, and my title here is Professor of Environmental Health Toxicology. So really interested in using this opportunity here at the University of California, Davis, to develop a program where toxicology is integrated into One Health. Have you heard of One Health before?
I haven't.
You haven't? Okay. Well, One Health is this concept of diseases which affect humans, animals, and environment at the same time. Okay? That One Health assumes that everything is interrelated. Okay? For example, with everybody's talking about COVID, we are hiding because of COVID, right? You're hiding out in the desert where you are, serene environment, not being exposed to everybody. You've heard the chatter that it could have originated from China, where humans interacted with wildlife, okay? And then people picked the disease when it jumped from wildlife to people, okay? And then it's new to us. So the same thing with toxicology. The toxicologists really have not done a very good job in linking the effect of chemicals in the environment to human and animal health. The UC Davis has a very good One Health Institute here, and they focus mainly on infectious disease. So I'm going to be, although I'm not directly working with the Institute, interested in what they do, and I'm looking to dwell more linking the environment, chemicals, and other diseases. I just give you a quick example. Mm-hmm. I know you had in our communication earlier, you talked about microplastics, right, in the environment. So you find that microplastics start with people. We use products which have these plastics in them, and we discharge them into the environment. They go into waterways, okay, and when they get into the waterways, they get ingested by small organisms. Then they impact the health of those small organisms. But besides that, these microplastics do absorb toxicants, like the persistent pollutants. For some reason, they are attracted to them, and so you find that fish are ingesting them, but microplastics are concentrating these toxins in the environment. So, and these persistent organic pollutants have a tendency to get into the food chain. You see what I'm saying? Through fish. And so we catch the fish, and they have now higher concentrations of these, and so then our health gets affected. So I'm trying to link things like that. And there are a number of issues on a global scale, from wildfires, how they are linked to plant health and human health, water health, and how those toxins generated through those wildfires end up in people, things like that get to affect animals. So that's one aspect, what I'm up to. But the other aspect, I'm still engaged with diagnostic toxicology, developing assays for detection of toxins, better diagnostics, so that we can improve quality of care. I'm also, right now, I'm working on a project where I know fumigants. Have you heard of fumigants? Mm-hmm. Which use soil fumigants, like bromide, have been absorbed by crops, and cows eating those have had some issues with reproduction. And so you're talking about a product which was applied to the soil, and it's ending up in a plant, animals are eating it, and it is being suspected of causing reproductive failure. And so I'm going to be doing a project to investigate that. What level is toxic in the hay? What are the real issues on unborn fetus, calf, and what are the effects in the pregnant animal? These are things that are not known. So I have a whole range of portfolio of interesting projects to add value and the knowledge to keep improving our profession. I liked California Davis here because of really its leadership in One Health, so that I can tie everything, the environment, animals, plants, and the human health together.
That is so cool. You should definitely create a team to track down the overall impact of fashion on animals and on toxicology too.
Now that like I said, your question was very intriguing because, we buy those clothes, we buy those hats, we buy those couches in the home. We don't think about what really goes into these. There is some talk about jewelry and where it comes with gold and stuff like that. But in terms of what goes into growing that silk, or what goes into growing that cotton, or what about the disposal of the clothing? What about the dyes? Those carcinogenic dyes and all those things. We usually don't tie it together. And it was really a joy to talk to you. So that to bring me out to raise my awareness, say, wow, this is a huge industry. It's really intertwined with so many other segments, and it's one of the biggest polluters. And interesting, we learn new things all the time, and I had not thought about it that way.
I cannot wait to read that report. I feel like it's going to be 1,000 pages long.
Thank you, Courtney. And I can't wait to read your book. You're doing some cool stuff too. Thank you very much for your call.
Yeah, thank you. And have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye, Courtney.
All right, bye. A big thank you again to Wilson Rumbeiha. Your years of dedication to the sciences is a blessing to all of us. And let us know down the line what else you learn about the link between fashion and organic toxicology. Thank you again for listening. Have a happy and wonderful and blessed New Year's. And that's a wrap.
Hey, this is Andrea in Cedar City. ES Now is a Holding Court production and is written and produced by Courtney Barriger. Music is by Parker Ainsworth. Fact-checked by Justin Howard. And a special thanks to Alexandra Shuck.